I marked the time in my notebook, 4:37 in the afternoon. The moving truck had been there since noon, but this was the first good look I'd gotten at our new neighbors. From my second-floor bedroom window, I had a clear view across Pinewood Drive to the Hendersons' old place, vacant since October when they'd moved to their daughters in Spokane. The family looked like a catalog picture: man, woman, teenage daughter. The girl looked about my age, maybe 16 or 17. Their golden retriever bounded across the patchy front lawn, sniffing everything with the enthusiasm of a dog discovering new territory. Good-looking animal, healthy coat. The father propped the front door open with a box marked kitchen, while the mother wrestled with the living room windows, pushing them up to let the May breeze sweep through. I wrote that down too. Open windows, open doors. They'd left the dog inside overnight. My pencil pressed hard enough to leave an indentation on the next page. Mom called from downstairs. "Jamie, dinner's ready." I closed my notebook, tucked it under my mattress alongside the others, and took one last look. The sky was still bright blue, hours from sunset, but the clock was ticking. The daughter laughed at something, the sound carrying across the street. She hadn't covered a single window. Mom had made pot roast, the good kind with carrots and potatoes that had soaked up all the juice. Dad sat at his usual spot, reading glasses perched on his nose as he scanned through the town bulletin. "Did you wash up?" Mom asked, not looking up from the serving. I nodded, then remembered she wasn't facing me. "Yes, ma'am." Dad folded the bulletin and set it aside. Mitchell's cow got through the fence again, found it half-mile up the creek. "Third time this spring," Mom said, passing him the bread basket. "He needs to reinforce that north corner." We ate in silence for a few minutes. I cut my meat into smaller pieces than necessary, waiting for someone to mention what we were all thinking about. Dad cleared his throat. "So, new folks moved in." Mom's fork paused halfway to her mouth. I saw the truck. "California plates," Dad said, like that explained everything. Maybe it did. "They've got a dog," I offered. "Golden retriever. Looks friendly." "They keeping it outside?" Dad asked, but his tone said he already knew the answer. I shook my head. "Inside. And they've got all the windows open." Mom set her fork down. "It's their first day, Robert. They wouldn't know yet." "Henderson's realtor should have told them," Dad said. "It's irresponsible not to disclose." "State law says they don't have to," Mom reminded him. "Remember the Wilsons? Realtor told them everything and they backed out of the sale, complained to the agency." I pushed a carrot around my plate. I could go over, just to introduce myself, welcome them to the neighborhood. My parents exchanged a look I'd seen 100 times before. Worry wrapped in something else. Resignation, maybe. "Jamie," Mom started, her voice gentle. "Outsiders don't usually—" "I know they don't believe it," I cut in. "But if nobody warns them, how is that fair?" Dad set his napkin down. "Son, people need to learn some things for themselves." "Like the Thompsons did?" I asked. The silence that followed hung heavy. "That's enough," Dad said finally. His voice was quiet but firm. "Pass the salt." After dinner, I helped Mom with the dishes. Outside, the sky had started to shift from blue to a pale orange at the horizon. 43 minutes until sunset by my calculation. "You think I should go over there?" I asked, drying a plate with slow, careful circles. Mom handed me another dish. "I think you need to be careful. Not everyone wants help, even when they need it. But the rules keep us safe," she said. "But they sound crazy to people who haven't seen what we've seen." I put the dish in the cabinet. "So we just let them figure it out the hard way?" She turned off the faucet and dried her hands. Her eyes, when she looked at me, were tired. "You've got a good heart, Jamie. Just be subtle if you go. Don't scare them off right away." Back in my room, I watched the light fade. 26 minutes until sunset. Across the street, the family continued unpacking. The dog ran in and out of the front door, barking playfully. The girl laughed as she chased it around the yard. Then they all went inside, leaving windows uncovered, the porch light off. I retrieved my notebook and made another entry. Member Day 1. No precautions taken. Complete ignorance of rules. Then I wrote down the 5 rules, the same ones I'd written in every notebook since I was old enough to understand. 1. Keep all dogs outside after dark. 2. Cover every window before sunset. 3. Never enter the woods at night. 4. Don't drive the highways between midnight and dawn. 5. If you hear knocking, never answer the door. I closed the notebook and watched as darkness settled over our little town. Across the street, warm light spilled from uncovered windows. The family moved behind them, unpacking, arranging, laughing. Normal people doing normal things. They had no idea what was watching. 23 minutes after sunset, I pulled my jacket over my shoulders and stood at our front door. The porch light cast a yellow pool that ended sharply at the bottom step. Beyond that, darkness had settled over Pinewood Drive. Dad leaned against the wall, arms folded. "You sure about this?" "Someone has to tell them." I zipped the jacket up to my neck. The evening had turned cool, typical for Montana in May. "They might not thank you for it." He didn't move to stop me, though. Mom appeared in the hallway behind him, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Take the flashlight, the good one." I grabbed the heavy mag light from the drawer. 4D batteries, aluminum casing. Could double as a club if needed. Not that I'd need it. Not if I was quick. "I'll be right back," I told them. 10 minutes, tops. Dad nodded once. "We'll be watching." Outside, our neighbor's house blazed with light from every uncovered window. Their moving truck was gone now, replaced by a dark blue SUV in the driveway. The license plate confirmed what Dad had said, California. I walked quickly across the street, focusing on the crack of my boots against the pavement rather than the darkness gathering at the edges of my vision. The Parkers' front porch light wasn't on. Bad sign. I knocked 3 times, quick and firm. Footsteps approached, and the door swung open. The man, Mr. Parker, stood there in a Stanford t-shirt, holding a screwdriver. Behind him, half-assembled furniture cluttered the living room. "Hi there," he said, friendly enough. "Can I help you?" I cleared my throat. "I'm James Mitchell. I live across the street with my parents." David Parker. He extended his free hand. His grip was firm. "Nice to meet you, James. We're still getting settled, as you can see. I noticed you moved in today. Thought I'd come welcome you to Milfield." A woman appeared behind him, Mrs. Parker, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist. "Who is it, Dave?" "Neighbor kid from across the street," Mr. Parker said. "James, this is my wife, Sarah." She gave a tired smile. "Hi there, sorry about the mess." The golden retriever pushed between them, sniffing excitedly at my jeans. His tail wagged so hard his whole back end swayed. "That's Rex," Mr. Parker said. "He's friendly." I bent down, let the dog sniff my hand. His coat felt clean and soft. "Good dog," I murmured. Then louder, "He seems well trained." "For a goofball, sure." Mr. Parker laughed. "You want to come in? We've got soda somewhere if we can find the right box." I hesitated at the threshold. Actually, I just wanted to pass along some local information. Things newcomers should know. Mrs. Parker raised an eyebrow. Like where to find decent pizza. More like safety stuff. I shifted my weight. There are some rules in Milfield that might seem odd, but they're important. "Rules?" Mr. Parker leaned against the doorframe, amused. "What kind of rules?" The girl I'd seen earlier appeared at the top of the stairs. She looked about my age, maybe a year younger. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, skeptical eyes. "Who's at the door?" she called down. "Neighbor kid with the rule book, apparently," Mr. Parker called back with a chuckle. I felt my face warm. It's not a rule book, just things people do to stay safe here. "Like what?" Mrs. Parker asked, folding her arms. I tried to remember what Mom had said about being subtle. Well, for starters, most folks keep their dogs outside after dark, and they cover their windows before sunset. Mr. Parker's smile widened. Seriously? Is this some kind of small-town hazing? Send the new folks ghost stories on the first night? It's not hazing, I said, keeping my voice level. It's just how things are done here. The girl came down the stairs, each step deliberate. She wore gray sweatpants and a hoodie with some university logo I didn't recognize. Oh my God, Dad. They're probably worried we'll see them sacrificing goats in their backyards or something. Emily, Mrs. Parker warned, but she was smiling too. I looked directly at Emily. It's not like that. These rules keep people safe. Safe from what? She challenged. I'd hoped they might just accept the advice without needing the full explanation. Most outsiders didn't believe anyway, not until they had to. There are things in Milfield that don't show themselves in daylight, I said carefully. Covering windows keeps them from seeing in. Dogs sense them first, but they'll try to get to the dogs if they're inside. The three Parkers exchanged glances. Mr. Parker's expression softened, like he was dealing with someone slightly unstable but harmless. That's fascinating folklore, he said kindly. Every small town has its quirks, I guess. It's not folklore, I insisted, hearing the edge in my voice. I took a breath. There are 5 basic rules. I can write them down for you. The 5 commandments of Milfield, Emily muttered, rolling her eyes. Mrs. Parker put her hand on my shoulder. That's very thoughtful, James. We appreciate you looking out for us. Her tone made it clear she was humoring me. I recognized the dismissal for what it was. Well, at least keep Rex outside tonight. I tried one last time. There's a covered doghouse in your backyard from the previous owners. In this cold. That's cruel, Mrs. Parker said. Rex sleeps inside. Always has. Behind them, Rex had stopped wagging his tail. His ears perked forward, head cocked toward the window. I should get back home, I said, suddenly aware of how long I'd been standing there. My parents are waiting. Thanks for stopping by, Mr. Parker said. Maybe you can show Emily around town sometime. She'll be starting at the high school next week. Emily gave me a look that suggested she'd rather eat dirt. I nodded and stepped back. Just think about what I said, please. They closed the door. Through the uncovered front windows, I watched them return to unpacking. Emily said something that made her parents laugh. I was halfway across the street when Rex started barking. Not the friendly bark of a dog greeting visitors. This was sharp, aggressive, warning. I turned back and saw him pressed against the bay window, hackles raised, teeth bared at something outside. I swung my flashlight toward the edge of their yard. The beam caught something tall standing motionless by the property line. Just for a second, a dark, vertical shape that didn't belong. Then nothing. Rex's barking grew frantic, desperate. I ran the rest of the way home, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. Inside, I slammed the door behind me and twisted the deadbolt. "Jamie?" Mom called from the kitchen. "What happened?" "There's something at their house," I said, moving to the phone in the hallway. "I'm calling Williams." Dad joined us, peering through our covered window. "Did they listen to you at all?" I shook my head and dialed. Officer Williams picked up on the second ring. "Milfield Police. It's James Mitchell," I said. "There's something outside the new family's house, the Parkers. Their dog's going crazy." "On my way," he said without hesitation. "Stay inside." I hung up and joined Dad at the window. Across the street, Rex continued barking, the sound muffled by distance but clearly panicked. They thought I was crazy, I told my parents. Treated me like I was telling campfire stories. "They'll learn," Dad said grimly. 8 minutes later, Williams's cruiser pulled up in front of the Parkers' house, light bar sweeping blue and red across the neighborhood. He spent 5 minutes searching the property with his flashlight and shotgun before approaching their front door. Through our window, I watched Mr. Parker open up, looking confused. Williams spoke to him, gesturing toward the yard. Mr. Parker shook his head, apparently dismissing whatever Williams was telling him. I could see Rex now. He'd retreated from the window and huddled against Emily's legs, trembling. The girl knelt beside him, stroking his head while staring out at the yard with wide eyes. For the first time, she wasn't smiling. Williams returned to his cruiser and drove slowly down the street, spotlights sweeping the darkness. When he passed our house, he gave a single nod in our direction. I went to my room and got my notebook from under the mattress. Under my earlier entry, I wrote, "Warning delivered, not believed. Entity sighted at property line after dark. Dog reacted strongly. Williams responded, nothing found. Emily Parker possibly shaken." I'd tried. That was all I could do for now, but it wouldn't be enough. My mother's hand on my shoulder pulled me from sleep. Her fingers dug in harder than necessary. "Jamie, wake up." Her voice had that tight quality it got when something was wrong. I blinked against the morning light streaming through my window. "What time is it?" 7:15. She pointed across the street. "Something's happened." I rolled out of bed and joined her at the window. Sarah Parker stood in her front yard wearing a blue bathrobe that flapped open in the breeze. She screamed, not words, just raw sound that carried even through my closed window. Her husband emerged from the house at a run, still wearing what looked like sleep clothes. That's when I saw Rex. The golden retriever lay sprawled on the patchy grass near the maple tree, his legs bent at angles that weren't right, completely motionless. Even from this distance, something about the stillness told me he wasn't just sleeping. "Oh no," I whispered. Mom's hand squeezed my shoulder. "Get dressed quickly." I pulled on jeans and a flannel shirt, laced my boots in 20 seconds flat. Downstairs, Dad stood at our front window, phone pressed to his ear. "Williams is on his way," he told Mom. "Ambulance too, though that dog is beyond help." Outside, the morning air felt crisp, normal. Birds chirped in the trees that lined Pinewood Drive. Mrs. Whitaker from 2 doors down walked her beagle on the opposite sidewalk, giving the Parker house a wide berth. The beagle strained at its leash, hackles raised, trying to move even farther away. I stayed on our porch, watching. Dad joined me, arms folded across his chest. "They kept him inside," he said. "Not a question." I nodded. I told them not to. Some lessons come hard. Officer Williams's cruiser arrived 4 minutes later, followed by the town's only ambulance. I recognized Pete Sanders behind the wheel. He doubled as an EMT when not running the hardware store. The ambulance seemed like overkill for a dead dog, but in Milfield, people took precautions. Williams spoke briefly with David Parker, who gestured wildly toward the dog, then toward the woods behind their property. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the set of Williams' shoulders told me he'd heard it all before. He knelt beside Rex, careful not to touch him, then stood and spoke into his radio. Emily appeared in the doorway of their house. Her face looked blotchy and swollen. When she saw Rex's body, she sat down hard on the front steps and buried her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with sobs I could see but couldn't hear. "I should bring them something," I said. Dad raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll listen now?" "Maybe. At least to some of it." Mom appeared behind us with a thermos and a covered dish. "Coffee and banana bread. Just made it yesterday." "Catherine," Dad started. "They lost their dog, Robert." Her voice left no room for argument. "And Jamie's right. Now they might listen." I took the thermos and dish, stepped off our porch, and crossed Pinewood Drive. Williams spotted me coming and nodded once, permission to approach. The Parkers' yard smelled like wet grass and something else underneath. Something sharp and wrong that made my nose wrinkle. David Parker stood with his back to me, staring down at Rex. His t-shirt had a coffee stain shaped like Florida on the left side. His feet were bare against the cool grass. "Mr. Parker." I kept my voice soft. He turned. The shock on his face had hardened into something else. Anger, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. His eyes were bloodshot. "James." He swallowed hard. From across the street. I brought coffee and some bread my mom made. He took the thermos mechanically. Thank you. I glanced at Rex's body. Pete Sanders had laid out a blue tarp beside it, preparing to move the remains. William stood nearby, writing in a small notebook. I'm sorry about Rex, I said. David's hand shot out and gripped my forearm. What is happening in this town? What really happened to our dog? I looked toward Emily on the steps, then at Sarah, who stood wrapped in her husband's jacket, shivering despite the mild temperature. The rules I tried to tell you about, I said carefully. They're not folklore or superstition. They keep people safe. Safe from what? His fingers dug into my arm. Williams approached, tucking his notebook into his shirt pocket. Mr. Parker, why don't we talk inside? James can join us if you'd like. Sarah nodded numbly and led the way. Inside, the house looked half-settled, boxes stacked in corners, furniture arranged but bare of decorations. Through the kitchen doorway, I saw dishes from last night's dinner still sitting on the counter. We sat at their dining table. Mom's banana bread remained covered in the center, untouched. David poured coffee into mugs with the mechanical movements of someone running on autopilot. Emily joined us, eyes red-rimmed, sitting close to her mother. His eyes were white, she whispered. They weren't like that before. They were brown yesterday. Williams cleared his throat. Mrs. Parker, did you hear anything unusual during the night? Sarah wrapped her hands around her coffee mug but didn't drink. Scratching at the windows. I thought it was tree branches, but... She looked toward the living room window. There aren't any trees close enough to touch the glass. And Rex? Williams asked. When did he start acting strange? Around midnight, David said. He wouldn't stop barking at the windows. Then he just cowered under Emily's bed, wouldn't come out, even for treats. We found him like that this morning, Sarah continued. Just lying there in the yard. No blood, no wounds, just... She made a twisting motion with her hands. Williams nodded and wrote something down. I'm going to have Pete take the remains for examination, but I should tell you this isn't the first incident of this nature in Milfield. What does that mean? David's voice rose. What killed our dog? Williams looked at me, then back to the Parkers. James tried to explain some of our town's safety protocols to you last night. I recommend you listen carefully now. All three Parkers turned to me. The weight of their attention made my chest tight. There are 5 basic rules in Milfield, I began, the same way I'd started last night. They sound strange, but they exist for good reasons. What reasons? David demanded. We don't know exactly what they are, I admitted. The things that come at night. No one who's seen them clearly has lived to describe them, but we know how they behave, what attracts them, and how to stay safe. Emily leaned forward. The rules. Tell us again. I counted them off on my fingers. 1. Keep all dogs outside after dark. Dogs sense these things first, and they'll try to get to the dogs if they're inside with you. That's why Rex, Sarah started. I nodded. 2. Cover every window before sunset. Don't let them see in. 3. Never enter the woods at night, no matter what you hear. 4. Don't drive the highways between midnight and dawn. And 5. If you hear knocking, never answer the door. David shook his head. This is insane. There has to be a rational explanation. Mountain lions, wolves, something real. No animal killed your dog without leaving marks, Williams said quietly. No animal turns eyes white like that. I should have listened, Emily whispered. Last night when Rex started barking at the window, I saw something. Just for a second. Tall and wrong-shaped. I thought it was just shadows. Sarah placed her hand over her daughter's. I saw it too, by the bird bath. David looked between them, then at me. Why didn't you just tell us straight out what we were dealing with? Why the cryptic warnings? Would you have believed me? I asked. If I'd said, hey, welcome to Milfield. We have monsters that'll kill your dog, and maybe you if you don't follow these weird rules. He stared at his coffee. No, I wouldn't have. Nobody does, Williams said, standing, until something happens. He handed David a card. Call me directly if you notice anything unusual, day or night. After Williams left, I stayed with the Parkers. Emily asked questions, specific ones about each rule, about past incidents, about how the town kept track of these things. David mostly listened, his skepticism visibly warring with what he'd seen with his own eyes. Sarah made fresh coffee and finally cut into Mom's banana bread. How do you live like this? She asked eventually. Always afraid? We're not afraid, I said. Not if we follow the rules. My family's been here 4 generations. The Mitchell before me, who died of anything besides old age or normal accidents, was my great-uncle in 1942, and that was because he got drunk and decided to drive to Helena at 1 in the morning. Emily checked her phone. Sunsets at 8:27 tonight. I looked at my watch, 11:15. You've got time to get what you need. Need? David asked. Blankets, sheets, heavy curtains, I explained. For the windows, and you'll want a doghouse for your next dog when you're ready. The Hendersons left a good one in the backyard, just needs cleaning. Next dog? David sounded hollow. If you stay, I said. Some families leave after the first incident. Emily shook her head fiercely. We're not leaving. We just need to be smart. She turned to her father. Right, Dad? David looked at his daughter for a long moment. We'll see. I left around noon, promising to check in before sunset. Back at home, Mom was baking again. Stress baking, she called it. They believe now, I told her, leaning against the counter. Well, Emily and Mrs. Parker do. Mr. Parker's still working on it. Mom nodded as she measured flour. Seeing is believing. It shouldn't have to be that way, I said. Rex didn't have to die. No, he didn't. She sifted the flour with more force than necessary. But some people need proof. Your father was like that when we first met. Thought all our rules were backward superstition until the Morrison incident. I'd heard about the Morrison incident my whole life. 3 teenagers found in the woods, their bodies arranged in a circle, eyes white as bone. Dad had been friends with one of them. Throughout the afternoon, I watched the Parkers' house from my window. David made 4 trips to the hardware store. On the last one, Pete Sanders helped him carry in what looked like thick curtain rods and blackout fabric. Emily and Sarah sorted through boxes, presumably looking for additional blankets and sheets. At 10 minutes to 6, I walked back over. Emily answered the door immediately, like she'd been waiting. We've been practicing, she said, leading me inside. The living room windows now had double-layered protection, blackout curtains backed by blankets secured with duct tape around the edges. David stood on a stepladder in the dining room, installing brackets above the bay window. We're about halfway done, Sarah told me. Think we'll finish in time? 2.5 hours until sunset, I said. You'll make it. Need another set of hands? David grunted from his perch on the ladder. Wouldn't hurt. I spent the next hour and a half helping them secure their home, showing them how to check for light leaks, how to reinforce weak points, how to create a proper seal. By 7:45, every window in the Parker house had been covered, every door secured with new deadbolts. Sarah stood in the living room, looking at the covered windows. It feels safer already. It is, I said. Just remember to do this every night before sunset. No exceptions. David handed me a soda from their refrigerator. What about the other rules? The woods, the highway, the knocking. The woods are worst in spring and fall, I explained. Sometimes you'll hear things, voices, crying, calls for help, real, human sounding. Don't go out no matter what. Call Williams if it bothers you. And the highway? Between midnight and dawn, stay off it. If you absolutely have to drive somewhere, take at least 2 people and don't stop for anything. Not accidents, not hitchhikers, nothing. Emily sat cross-legged on the couch, taking notes in a spiral notebook. And the knocking? What's that about? Sometimes they'll knock on doors or windows at night. Different patterns. Sometimes they sound like people you know. Don't answer, don't look out. Just wait until morning. David shook his head slightly. This is still the craziest thing I've ever heard. But after Rex, he trailed off. The rules work, I said simply. They've kept this town alive for generations. Outside, the light had turned golden as the sun approached the horizon. 23 minutes until official sunset. I should get home, I said, standing. My parents will be waiting. Emily walked me to the door. Thank you for trying to warn us and for helping today. Just being neighborly, I said. She looked at me seriously. Will you teach us more? Everything you know about staying safe here? I nodded. That's what neighbors do in Milfield. We look out for each other. Because no one else would believe us if we told them, she said quietly. Now you're getting it. I walked home as the shadows lengthened across Pinewood Drive. Behind me, I heard the Parkers' door close, lock engage, deadbolt slide into place. From their yard, I could see the fresh mound of dirt where they'd buried Rex that afternoon. Inside our house, Mom and Dad sat in the living room, curtains already drawn tight against the approaching night. They get everything covered? Dad asked. Every window, I confirmed. New locks, too. They'll need a dog, Mom said. Sanders at the hardware store said his lab just had puppies, 8 weeks old in a few days. I went to my bedroom window for one last look before closing my own curtains. Across the street, the Parker house stood dark and sealed. No light leaked from any window. They'd learned the first rule properly. Now they just needed to master the other 4. I had just finished washing dinner dishes when the phone rang. 8:01 according to the microwave clock. Mom answered it in the living room, then called my name with that slight edge that meant trouble. It's for you, Emily Parker. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and took the receiver. Hello? James? Emily's voice came through as a whisper, tight with fear. There's someone in the woods behind our house. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. What do you mean, someone? Crying. Like they're hurt. Dad thinks it's a kid. Her breath hitched. He's getting his flashlight. Mom can't stop him. My stomach dropped. Don't let him go outside. Don't even open the door. He won't listen to me. I'm coming over. Keep him inside for 2 minutes. I slammed the phone down and grabbed my boots from the mat by the back door. Dad looked up from his newspaper. Parker House, I told him, jamming my feet into the boots without bothering with the laces. Someone crying in the woods. Dad stood immediately. I'll call Williams. No time. I yanked open the door. Call after. The night air hit my face as I sprinted across our yard. Twilight had faded to true darkness. The temperature already dropped 10 degrees since sunset. Our porch light carved a yellow cone that ended at the bottom step. Beyond that, shadows pooled between streetlights. I crossed Pinewood Drive at a dead run, scanning the Parker house. The crying reached me halfway across their lawn, high-pitched, wavering, unmistakably young-sounding, coming from the tree line behind their property. Help. Please help me. The voice sounded like a child, maybe 8 or 9 years old. I pushed away the instinct to turn toward it and kept moving. Their back door stood unlocked, a mistake I'd have to mention later if we survived the night. I burst through into their kitchen without knocking. Sarah Parker stood at the counter, knuckles white around a glass of water. She flinched when I entered but didn't scream. James, she breathed. Thank God. Through the doorway to the living room, I saw David with his hand on the front doorknob, a heavy flashlight in his other hand. Emily stood between him and the door, arms spread. Dad, wait. James is here. David turned. His face looked drawn tight, jaw clenched. There's a child out there. Didn't you hear it? I positioned myself beside Emily, blocking the door. It's not a child, Mr. Parker. You don't know that, he shot back. What if someone's hurt? What if some kid wandered off the trail and got lost? The crying came again, louder, a child's voice breaking with fear. Please, I'm scared. It's dark. I don't know where I am." David gestured toward the sound. "See, we have to help. No one is lost in those woods, Mr. Parker." I kept my voice calm, factual. No hiking groups reported missing members. No parents called in a missing child. Officer Williams would have notified the community. "Maybe they don't know yet," David insisted. "Maybe the kid wandered off from a campsite." I shook my head. No one camps in those woods. No one has for decades. The crying morphed into sobbing, seemingly closer now. "Mom? Dad? Please help me. I'm cold." Emily's arms lowered slightly, her resolve visibly weakening. "It sounds so real." "That's the point," I said. "It's supposed to sound real. That's how it works." David's hand tightened on the doorknob. "This is insane. There's a child out there while we stand here debating folklore." "It's the third rule, Dad," Emily said, though her voice wavered. "Never enter the woods at night." "Rules that some teenager made up?" David snapped. Sarah moved into the living room and put her hand on her husband's arm. "Dave, we already lost Rex. I can't lose you, too." The crying grew more desperate. "Please, I see something moving. Something's coming for me." I watched the effect ripple across their faces, the instinct to help battling against the fear of the unknown. The crying voice had found the perfect pitch, the perfect words. I'd heard it before, using different voices, different pleas. It knew exactly how to reach inside people and pull. "Mr. Parker," I said firmly, "has it occurred to you that we don't allow kids to play near those woods? That parents in Milfield don't let their children out after dark? There are no missing children in this town tonight." He hesitated, uncertainty flickering across his face. "It's a lure," I continued. "Like a fishing lure, designed to make you come to it." "That's ridiculous," he said, but his grip on the doorknob loosened slightly. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "The Thompsons thought it was ridiculous too. 3 years ago. Mr. Thompson went out to investigate crying just like this. They found him the next morning at the edge of the woods." "What happened to him?" Emily asked. I met her eyes. Same thing that happened to Rex. No visible wounds, just broken, and his eyes turned white. The child's voice called again, this time with a hint of something underneath that wasn't quite right, a resonance that normal vocal cords couldn't produce. "Mommy? Daddy? Please help me find you." Emily flinched and stepped back from the door. "That's wrong somehow." 5 missing hikers last year in these mountains," I said. "All reported hearing a child crying before they disappeared. Search and rescue found 3 of the bodies. The other 2 were never recovered." David finally released the doorknob. "You're saying it's some kind of predator? A mountain lion or something, mimicking sounds?" "I'm saying it's something that knows exactly what will make people open their doors at night." I didn't have a better explanation to offer. No one in Milfield did. We just knew the patterns, the results. Sarah took the flashlight from her husband's hand. "Dave, please, let's just wait until morning. If there really is someone out there, we can call the police now." "I told my dad to call Officer Williams before I ran over," I said. "He'll drive by the woods, shine his spotlight, check if there's actually anyone there." The crying changed tactics, becoming a series of small whimpers and gasps, like someone trying to be brave through pain. I fell. "My leg hurts. I can't walk." Emily wrapped her arms around herself. "How long will this go on?" "Hard to say. Sometimes minutes, sometimes hours." We moved away from the door. Sarah guided David to the couch while I checked their window coverings. All still secure. No gaps where light might leak out or eyes might peek in. Emily stood in the center of the living room, hands pressed against her ears, but the thin barriers of flesh and bone couldn't block the crying completely. 10 minutes passed. The voice occasionally switched approaches, sometimes frightened, sometimes injured, sometimes calling specific names as if it were trying different combinations to see what might work. None of them were names of people in the room. Melissa, Richard, is anyone there? David sat with his elbows on his knees, head in his hands. How can we just sit here if there's even a chance it's real? Because the alternative is worse, I said. At 8:47, Williams's cruiser pulled up outside. We watched through a gap in the curtains as he trained his spotlight on the tree line, sweeping it methodically across the edge of the woods. The crying stopped momentarily while the light passed, then resumed once the beam moved on. Williams got out of his car and approached the house. Sarah opened the door just enough to let him in, then quickly closed and locked it behind him. "James," he nodded to me, then addressed the Parkers. "Your father called it in," he explained to me. "Said you might need some backup." "There's a child in the woods," David said immediately. Williams shook his head. "No, sir, there isn't." "But the crying—" "I've checked the entire perimeter with thermal imaging," Williams said, patting the device on his belt. "No heat signatures consistent with a human body. Not even a deer or coyote within 50 yards of the tree line." The crying came again, plaintive and small. "Please, I'm so cold." "Then what's making that sound?" Sarah asked. Williams' face remained neutral, professional. "I've been with Milfield PD for 16 years, Mrs. Parker. In that time, I've responded to 27 reports of crying in the woods. Not once has it been an actual person." "Then what is it?" David demanded. "Above my pay grade to explain," Williams said evenly. "But I can tell you this. In 16 years, we've lost 7 people who went into those woods at night to investigate sounds like that. Never lost anyone who stayed inside with their doors locked." The conversation seemed to take some of the fight out of David. He sank back onto the couch and closed his eyes. Williams turned to me. "Your folks know you're here?" I nodded. "Dad said he'd call you." "Good. I'll stay parked outside for a while. Keep an eye on things." He checked his watch. "These episodes rarely last past midnight." After Williams left, we sat in the living room listening to the crying. It continued for nearly 2 hours, sometimes fading as if moving deeper into the woods, then returning closer and more desperate. The voice tried different approaches. A young girl, a slightly older boy, even a toddler at one point, babbling words interspersed with sobs. At 9:37, it tried a new tactic. "James? James Mitchell? Please help me." My head snapped up. It had never used my name before. Emily stared at me, eyes wide. "It knows you're here." "It's guessing," I said, though the hair on my arm stood straight up. "It tries different things until something works." By 10:06, the crying finally began to fade, moving deeper into the woods until we could barely hear it. 5 minutes later, it stopped completely. The silence felt almost as unnerving as the crying had been. Williams knocked once on the door at 10:30, called through that he was leaving but would drive by every hour until dawn. David thanked him in a hollow voice. I stood to leave. "I should get back. My parents will be worried." "Don't go," Emily said quickly. "Not yet." Sarah nodded agreement. "Stay a little longer, James, please." I sat back down. David hadn't moved from his spot on the couch, staring at his hands. After several minutes of silence, he looked up at me. "I would have gone out there," he said quietly. "If you hadn't shown up when you did, I would have gone looking for that child. I know. And I wouldn't have come back, would I?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He dragged his hands down his face. "I thought you were exaggerating. Even after Rex, part of me thought this was all some elaborate small-town prank or mass hysteria." "Not a prank," I said. "Just survival." David looked toward the covered windows, beyond which lay darkness and woods and things we couldn't explain. "How do you live with this, knowing what's out there?" "By following the rules," I said simply. "They work if you let them." I stayed another 30 minutes, helping them check the window coverings once more before heading home. The night air felt heavy as I crossed the street, prickling my skin. I didn't run this time, but I walked quickly, eyes straight ahead, ignoring the rustling sounds from the drainage ditch that ran alongside the road. Inside our house, Mom and Dad sat at the kitchen table with mugs of tea. They looked up when I entered. "Parker house secure?" Dad asked. I nodded, unlacing my boots. "They're learning," Williams helped. "That crying was closer to town than usual," Mom said. "Normally stays deeper in the woods." "It used my name tonight," I told them. "Called for me specifically." Dad's mug stopped halfway to his mouth. "That's new. Maybe because I was inside their house. Maybe it could tell somehow." My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "Get some sleep," Mom said finally. "School tomorrow." In my room, I took out my notebook and wrote, "Crying in woods behind Parker House. Duration, approximately 2 hours, 8:08 p.m. to 10:06 p.m. Used multiple voices, knew my name. David nearly went outside to investigate. No heat signatures detected by Williams. Parker's shaken but safe." I closed the notebook and slid it under my mattress with the others. Through my window, I could see the Parker house, dark, properly sealed against the night. They'd passed their second test. Barely. 3 rules down, 2 to go. The slam of car doors yanked me from sleep. My bedside clock read 12:02 in the morning. I rolled over, thinking I'd dreamed it, when a second slam, followed by the metallic thunk of a trunk closing, pulled me fully awake. I pushed aside my curtain and peered across the street. The Parkers' SUV sat idling in their driveway, headlights cutting twin cones through the darkness. David loaded a suitcase into the back while Sarah hurried Emily toward the passenger door. Their movements had the jerky, rushed quality of people running from something. I yanked on jeans over my boxers, grabbed a flannel shirt from the back of my desk chair, and jammed my feet into unlaced boots. Keys, wallet, phone. I pulled a sweatshirt over my head as I took the stairs 2 at a time. The house was silent. Mom and Dad's door remained closed. They'd gone to bed around 10, and neither was a light sleeper. I scribbled a quick note on the pad by the phone. "Parker's leaving, following to make sure they're safe. Call if you wake up. J." Outside, the night air bit cold through my sweatshirt. Late May in Montana still carried winter's edge after sundown. The temperature had dropped to maybe 40 degrees, my breath fogging as I jogged across Pinewood Drive. "Mr. Parker," I called, keeping my voice low enough not to wake neighbors but loud enough to carry across their yard. David's head snapped up. He wore a rumpled button-down shirt tucked into yesterday's pants, like he'd fallen asleep in his clothes and hadn't bothered changing. Dark circles hung under his eyes. "James," he slammed the trunk. "Go back home. It's the middle of the night. That's what I should be telling you." I stopped at the edge of their driveway. "Where are you going?" "Billings," Sarah answered, appearing from the side of the car. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her eyes red-rimmed. "My sister lives there. We're going to stay with her for a while." "At midnight? Why not wait until morning?" David's jaw tightened. "Because we can't spend another night in this house." Emily emerged from the car, wrapped in a hoodie 2 sizes too large. "Something was in my room," she said quietly, "standing by my bed, just watching me." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. "Did you see what it looked like?" "No, just a shadow, darker than the rest of the room." She hugged herself. "When I turned on my light, it was gone, but I could smell it, like wet leaves and something rotting underneath." "You should call Williams," I said. "He can check the house, make sure nothing's still inside." We did call. David yanked open the driver's side door. "Straight to voicemail. Left 3 messages. "Then wait until morning," I insisted. "Please, the 4th rule." "Don't drive the highways between midnight and dawn," Emily recited. "I know, but Dad won't listen." David shook his head. "We're not staying here another minute. Not after what happened to Rex. Not with that thing in the woods that knows our names. Not with something inside our house." "Then let me drive you," I offered. "Or you can stay at my house until sunrise." "We're going, James." His tone left no room for argument. "Thank you for your help, but we need to leave." Sarah touched my arm. "We'll come back for the rest of our things in a few days, in daylight." I stepped back as they climbed into the SUV. The engine revved as David backed out of the driveway. I stood in the street watching their taillights recede down Pinewood Drive, my mind racing through options. Let them go and hope for the best. Wake my parents? Call Williams again? None would help fast enough. I turned and ran back to my house, grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, and headed for the garage. Dad's old Ford F-150 sat where it always did. I'd had my license for 6 months, but rarely drove at night, another of Milfield's unwritten customs. The truck started on the first try. I backed out carefully, not wanting to wake my parents, and headed in the direction the Parkers had gone. Their taillights were still visible at the edge of town, turning onto the highway that would take them east toward Billings. I pulled out my phone at the first stoplight and tried Williams again, straight to voicemail like David had said. "Officer Williams, it's James Mitchell. The Parkers are driving to Billings right now at midnight. I'm following to make sure they get there safely. Please call me when you get this." The highway stretched empty before me, a black ribbon caught occasionally in my headlights. The Parkers' SUV maintained a steady pace about a quarter mile ahead. I kept that distance, not wanting to spook them by tailgating, but not wanting to lose sight of them either. "Where are you?" he asked without preamble. "Highway 47, about 30 miles outside Billings, following the Parkers." My voice sounded hoarse, like I'd been yelling. "You see anything unusual?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Woman on the roadside, hitchhiker. They almost stopped for her." Williams was silent for 3 heartbeats. "What did she look like?" "Human, at first, then not." I swallowed. Face changed when she looked at me. "Don't stop for anything else," he said. "Stay with the Parkers until they reach their destination. Call me when you're somewhere safe." "Williams," I said before he could hang up. "She wasn't the only one. There was something in their house tonight. Emily saw it in her room." Another pause. "That explains the increased activity. 2 rules broken in 2 days." "What do you mean?" "Actions have consequences, James. Breaking rules upsets the balance." He sighed heavily. "Get the Parkers to Billings safely. We'll talk when you're back." The call ended. I placed the phone on the passenger seat, suddenly aware of how dry my mouth had become. At 1:43, we passed a sign welcoming us to Billings. The Parkers took the second exit, leading us into a residential area of modest, single-story homes with neatly trimmed lawns. Their turn signal blinked as they turned onto Meadowlark Avenue, then again as they pulled into the driveway of a pale blue house with white shutters. I parked at the curb, keeping the engine running. The porch light came on, and a woman in a bathrobe appeared at the front door. Sarah's sister, I assumed. The Parker family hurried inside without unloading their luggage. David reappeared a minute later and walked to my truck. I rolled down the window. "You followed us all the way here." His voice contained equal parts gratitude and disbelief. "Had to make sure you made it." He nodded, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "That woman on the road. You saw her too?" "I saw something using a woman's shape," I said carefully. "It's why we don't drive at night." David leaned against my truck, suddenly looking 10 years older. "When we almost stopped for her, Emily screamed at me not to. Said her face was wrong." He shook his head. "I didn't see it until she stepped into the headlights. That couldn't have been human." "No. The rules," he said quietly. "They're not superstition or small-town paranoia, are they? They're survival." "Yes." He straightened up and met my eyes directly. "Thank you for trying to warn us, for following us tonight, for everything. Just being a good neighbor." "Are we still neighbors? I don't know if we're coming back." I shrugged. "Your choice. But if you do, you know what to expect now. No more surprises." "No more surprises," he repeated. "Just monsters we can't explain that follow specific rules we have to remember." "Pretty much." He patted the door of my truck. You're driving back? No, I'll find a motel, head back after sunrise. I gestured at the house. Your family okay? Shaken. Emily won't talk about what she saw in her room. He hesitated. Whatever it was just stood there, watching her. Didn't approach, didn't touch her. Just observed. I nodded, not mentioning that this matched other reports I'd heard over the years. First encounters were often observational. The entities learned before they acted. Get some rest, I told him. You're safe in Billings. He walked back to the house, shoulders hunched against the night air. I waited until he was inside before pulling away from the curb. I found a motel 3 blocks away, a budget inn with a flickering vacancy sign and a bored clerk who barely looked up from his phone when I paid for a room. The door stuck when I tried to open it, requiring a solid shoulder check before it gave way. Inside, I sat on the edge of the bed without turning on the lights. My phone showed 2:17 in the morning. I sent a quick text to my parents letting them know I was safe in Billings and would return in the morning, then called Williams to report that the Parkers had arrived safely. Any more incidents after we spoke? He asked. No. Clear drive after that woman. Good. He paused. The Parkers broke 2 rules in 3 days. That tends to draw attention. They were scared. Something was in their house. I know. I checked the property after getting your messages. Found tracks in the mud by the back door. Not human, not animal either. My skin prickled. What do you think will happen if they come back? Depends if they follow all the rules from now on. Williams's voice held no judgment, just pragmatic assessment. Some families adjust, some don't. Some leave and never return. And some disappear, I added. Get some sleep, James. Drive safe tomorrow. I ended the call and lay back on the bed, still fully clothed. Sleep seemed impossible, but exhaustion eventually won out. My last conscious thought was wondering whether the Parkers would return to Milfield and what might be waiting for them if they did. Outside my motel window, a figure stood motionless in the parking lot, face tilted toward my room. I didn't see it. By the time I woke at 7:30 the next morning, it was long gone, leaving only a set of strange, elongated footprints that disappeared abruptly at the edge of the asphalt. I woke at 7:13 the next morning with the stale taste of motel air in my mouth. The thin curtains did little to block the morning light slanting through the windows. I lay there for a moment, listening to the rumble of early traffic on the nearby highway and the clatter of a maid's cart rolling past my door. After a shower that alternated between scalding and freezing with no middle ground, I grabbed a stale bagel from the motel's continental breakfast and headed for the Parkers. Sarah's sister's blue house looked smaller in daylight, the white shutters showing patches of peeling paint. A tricycle lay on its side in the front yard. I knocked 3 times. Footsteps approached from inside, and Emily opened the door. Her hair hung damp around her shoulders, like she'd just showered. Dark circles underlined her eyes. "Hey," she said, stepping back to let me in. "I told Dad you'd probably come by before heading home." The house smelled of coffee and cinnamon. Sarah and her sister sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around matching mugs. David stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, talking in the measured tones of someone leaving a business message. "Calling work," Emily explained, telling them he needs personal time. Sarah spotted me and rose from the table. "James, you look exhausted." "Didn't sleep much," I admitted. "None of us did." She gestured toward the coffee maker. "Help yourself." I poured coffee into a chipped mug with a Yellowstone souvenir logo. David finished his call and joined us, extending his hand. "You saved our lives last night," he said as we shook. No hesitation in his voice, no hint of skepticism. Just did what anyone from Milfield would do. "No," he shook his head firmly. "We almost stopped for that thing on the road. If you hadn't been behind us honking your horn." He glanced at his family, then back to me. "Thank you." Emily moved closer, arms crossed over her chest like she was holding something inside. "I saw its face change," she said quietly. "Right before you started honking. It was like—" She made a fluid motion with her hand over her own face, like it forgot how to look human. Sarah's sister, introduced as Teresa, watched this exchange with the uncomfortable expression of someone hearing a private family matter. She'd been told something, clearly, but not everything. David cleared his throat. "We're going to stay here a few days, figure things out." "You coming back to Milfield?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. The three Parkers exchanged glances. "I think so," Sarah said finally. "It's where our jobs are, where we've invested our savings. And we know the rules now," Emily added with a fragile attempt at humor. "All of them." David leaned against the counter. "Is it always like this? Things in the woods? Hitchhikers that aren't human? Or did we just have spectacularly bad luck?" "Mostly quiet if you follow the rules," I said. "Some families go years without incidents. My parents have lived there their whole lives and only have a handful of stories." I sipped my coffee. "But when rules get broken, especially multiple rules in quick succession, it draws attention," Emily finished. I nodded. "Like tossing rocks into a still pond, creates ripples." David rubbed his jaw, the stubble making a scratching sound against his palm. "We need time to process all this, but if we do come back, we'll be prepared." I finished my coffee and rinsed the mug in the sink. I should head home. It's a long drive. Emily walked me to the door while her parents remained in the kitchen. On the porch, she stopped me with a light touch on my arm. "I never thanked you properly," she said, "for trying to warn us from the beginning, for coming over when I called, for following us here." "You don't need to thank me." "I do." She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me briefly. The scent of shampoo and the warmth of her cheek against mine lasted only a moment before she pulled back. "I've never been so scared in my life, but I've also never felt as safe as when you showed up at our door last night." Heat crept up my neck. I looked past her at the neighboring houses, the ordinary suburban street basking in morning sunlight. Everything here seemed so normal, so disconnected from what we'd experienced. "If you come back to Milfield," I said, "things can be okay. The rules work. They're enough." "I know." She gave a small, determined nod. "And I think we will be back. Dad's too stubborn to let something like this chase us away permanently." I left them standing on the porch, Emily, then her parents and aunt appearing behind her, and drove back toward Milfield with the windows down, letting the rushing air clear my head. The highway looked different in daylight, ordinary, just asphalt and pine trees and mile markers. No hint of what traveled it after midnight. I arrived home just after noon to find Officer Williams' cruiser in our driveway. He sat talking with my father on the front porch, both with coffee mugs balanced on the wide wooden railing. They turned at the sound of my truck. "There he is," Dad said, standing to meet me. "Got your text this morning. Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Parkers are safe at the sister's house." Williams nodded. "Good work, James. Not many teenagers would have done what you did." "Not many teenagers would have been allowed to," I pointed out, glancing at my father. Dad's mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Special circumstances." We moved inside where Mom fussed over me, insisting I eat something while she bombarded me with questions. I gave them the basics: the Parkers' hasty departure, the entity on the roadside, the safe arrival in Billings. "That poor family," Mom said, sliding a plate of reheated lasagna in front of me. "First the dog, then that thing in the woods, then something in their house." William set down his coffee mug. "About that, I did a complete sweep of their property after getting your calls, found tracks by their back door." "What kind of tracks?" Dad asked. "Not easy to describe," Williams frowned. "Longer than a human foot. Narrower. 5 distinct impressions where toes would be, but spread wider than normal. Deep impressions like whatever made them was heavy." "Same thing Emily saw in her room?" I asked between bites. Likely, and it relates to what I came here to tell you. Williams leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You weren't the only one who saw a woman on the highway last night, had 3 other calls. Henderson saw her near mile marker 42, Cooper spotted her at the county line, and old man Gunderson almost hit her with his truck just outside Livingston. I set down my fork. That's impossible. Those spots are miles apart, and they all saw her around the same time. Between midnight and 1:30, Williams nodded grimly. All described the same woman. Young, dark hair, inappropriate dress for the weather. All said her face changed when they got close. A chill ran through me despite the warm food in my stomach. How is that possible? Dad and Williams exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. There's a lot we don't understand, Dad said finally. That's why we have the rules. They work even if we don't know exactly what we're dealing with. But 3 different locations? That means there are multiple. It means, Williams interrupted, that we don't have all the answers. Maybe never will, but we know enough to stay safe. The conversation shifted to more immediate concerns, whether the Parkers would return, what to tell the neighbors about their sudden departure, how to secure their house while they were gone. I answered questions mechanically, fatigue settling into my bones like lead weights. Eventually, Williams left and Mom insisted I get some sleep. I crawled into bed still wearing my clothes and fell into dreamless exhaustion. Life settled back into its normal rhythm over the next week. School continued with final exams approaching. The Henderson house, now the Parker house, sat empty but not abandoned. Williams drove by it during his regular patrols. Dad and I mowed their lawn once when the grass grew too high. 13 days after the Parkers fled to Billings, a moving truck appeared in their driveway. Not a large one, just big enough for essential furniture and boxes. I watched from my bedroom window as David Parker directed the movers, pointing toward different rooms. Sarah supervised the unloading of kitchen items. Emily carried smaller boxes herself, pausing occasionally to look across the street at our house. I waited until they'd been back for a few hours before walking over. All 3 Parkers looked different somehow. More weathered, more aware. David had lost weight. Sarah's smile seemed more measured. Emily's eyes tracked movement at the edges of the yard, constantly scanning. "Welcome back," I said simply. "Thanks," David replied. Decided we weren't going to let fear drive us from our home. Sarah appeared in the doorway behind him. Besides, the rules aren't that hard to follow once you understand why they exist. They invited me inside. The house looked different. All windows now had blackout curtains permanently installed. A heavy deadbolt had been added to each exterior door. Salt lines marked thresholds in a tradition I hadn't mentioned, but they'd apparently researched. "We got a dog," Emily said, leading me to the back door. In the yard, a young German Shepherd mix explored the perimeter of the fence. "His name is Cooper, already trained to sleep in the doghouse." David handed me a beer from the refrigerator, then caught himself. "Sorry, you're 17, I supplied, accepting it anyway. After what we'd been through, a beer seemed insignificant. "I've been researching," David said, sitting across from me at their dining table. "Town records, newspaper archives, historical society documents. Find anything interesting?" "Patterns." He took a long sip from his own bottle. "Families who've lived in Milfield for generations without incident. Others who disappeared within months of arriving. The Thompsons you mentioned found records of their deaths 3 years ago." I nodded. They didn't believe the rules either. "And the Morrison kids? Found them too. 1978. Before my time," I said. "But my dad remembers." Emily joined us at the table. "There are stories like this all over the country. Small towns with strange rules and unexplained phenomena. But Milfield has better documentation than most." "And better survival rates," Sarah added from the kitchen where she unpacked dishes. We talked for another hour about what they'd learned, what they'd decided. They would stay in Milfield, follow the rules rigorously, and adapt to this new reality. David had already installed timers on the exterior lights to ensure they activated precisely at sunset. Sarah had sewn extra blackout material to layer behind their curtains. Emily had memorized the sunset times for the entire summer. "I start school next week," Emily said as I prepared to leave. "Same school as you, right?" "Milfield High. Only one in town." "Will people know? About us, I mean." "About what happened?" I considered this. People know enough not to ask details. But yeah, they'll know you're the family that learned about the rules the hard way. It'll wear off eventually. She nodded, absorbing this. Better than being the family that disappeared, I guess. Much better, I agreed. 2 weeks after their return, Emily joined my junior year classes at Milfield High. She sat next to me in advanced biology and across the aisle in English literature. During lunch breaks, she asked careful questions about local history and which families had been here longest. She noted which students seemed to understand the unspoken realities of our town and which remained blissfully ignorant, typically those whose parents had shielded them from the truth until they were older. One afternoon, walking home from school, we passed the edge of the woods that backed up to several properties along Pinewood Drive. Emily stopped, studying the tree line with a measured gaze. "It's beautiful during the day," she observed. "Hard to believe it hides anything dangerous." "Most dangerous things know how to look harmless," I replied. "Otherwise, they'd never get close to what they want." She turned to face me, like that woman on the highway. Exactly like that. We continued walking, maintaining a careful distance from the woods even in broad daylight, old habits that Emily had quickly adopted. "My parents are having a small barbecue this weekend," she said. "Just a few neighbors. Your family's invited. Dad wants to be more connected to the community." Smart move. "Is it wrong that part of me is grateful this happened?" she asked abruptly. Not Rex dying or that thing in my room, but knowing the truth. I look at other kids at school who don't know, and I feel sorry for them. "Knowledge is protection," I said, "even when it's uncomfortable." She nodded. "Exactly." That evening, I added a final entry to my notebook about the Parkers. Day 37. Parkers have successfully implemented all 5 rules. New dog kept outside after dark. Windows properly covered before sunset each night. No incidents reported since their return. Emily adapting well to school and community expectations. David researching town history and sharing findings with other residents. Sarah organizing neighborhood watch program with William's approval. Family appears committed to long-term residence in Milfield. I closed the notebook and placed it with the others under my mattress. From my window, I could see the Parker house across the street, buttoned up tight against the approaching sunset, porch light already on, Cooper safely in his doghouse. They had learned how to survive here. As twilight deepened into true darkness, I heard Cooper bark once, a short, sharp sound of alertness rather than alarm. Through my covered window, I watched the shadows beneath the trees at the edge of their property. Something moved there, a darker patch against the night. It paused, seeming to study the Parker house with its properly covered windows and illuminated porch. After a moment, it retreated back into the deeper shadows of the woods. The rules had been followed, the balance maintained. For tonight, at least, everyone was safe. I felt a quiet sense of accomplishment watching that shadow withdraw. Not pride exactly, but the satisfaction of having preserved something fragile. Not just the Parker family, but the delicate equilibrium that kept Milfield alive despite what lurked beyond its edges. 5 simple rules, passed down through generations, had proven their worth once again. In a town like ours, that was all anyone could really ask for.